More insights on Kamala Harris's keynote speech. Let's speak now with John Fortier. He's senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. John, good day. Thank you very much for your time. You were watching Ms. Harris stake her claim in the political speech of her life. From what you saw, did she make a convincing enough case to the American public that she can be their next president?
Well, I think broadly speaking, it was a successful conclusion to a good convention and to a good several weeks. Obviously, the Democratic Party was reeling with Joe Biden's debate performance. The replacement of her has brought new excitement to the Democratic Party. So I think she did a good job of capping a time where Democrats are more united. Big issues. She certainly wanted to bring up issues that Democrats care about, especially college-educated Democrats, those of democracy, worries about Donald Trump, those about protection of abortion rights. Tried to present herself more as a leader on the world stage. That's something she hasn't been in the forefront of. And then, of course, had to deal with difficult issues like the border, like Gaza and Israel. I think there's a lot more work to be done in many ways because the specifics really aren't there and many people don't know her. But overall, she put her message in her convention and put herself in a good place.
Okay, let's break things down. She covered a lot. I asked this question to our correspondent a moment ago. You know, we have reproductive rights, building a strong middle class, border control. What one issue do you think spoke the most loudly to the American public?
Well, I think she's speaking to different publics. Again, I think democracy and abortion rights have been things that Democrats have been really stressing as motivators of their base, that they did well with in the 2022 elections, and especially with a college-educated part of their base. So those are big themes. Where I think she is struggling as a candidate, where she had to put her foot on both sides, or on the one hand on the border. She made a case for herself as being strong on the border, but I think that's going to be a tough issue for her. Donald Trump is going to come at her and the performance of the administration very hard. And on foreign policy, broadly trying to paint herself as a strong leader, but that difficult issue of Israel-Gaza, where her party has some divides, and having to say there's some strong things on one side and then on the other. We'll see how that plays afterwards. But I think the democracy and the abortion issues are ones that are really Democratic motivators that she put first in her speech, and ones that she's going to be putting on the campaign trail as Donald Trump is a threat to.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So the international audience watching tonight, you know, Ms. Harris said she will stand strong with Ukraine and NATO allies. She said China will not win in the 21st century. She will strengthen America's global leadership and not abandon it. And she received enormous applause when speaking about Israel, saying she will always ensure that the country has the ability to defend itself. What do you make of her foreign policy agenda based on those clues?
Well, first, I think, it's a relatively new introduction of herself to the American people on this. And so I think she made a good first step, but I think she'll be asked about it a lot more, especially in the debates. I think the message about standing with Ukraine and standing with allies will be heard well around the world. I think when she comes to debate Donald Trump, he will say, in my presidency, we didn't have these conflicts. I was a stronger leader. I was more of a deterrent to some of these things happening. And that's the debate that will go back and forth. On Israel and Gaza, I think she did her best to say both she's a strong supporter of Israel, but also say that there are problems in Gaza and give credit to both sides. And the convention did not have the very large protests or the disruptive protests that some thought they would. I think that issue, though, is not going away as we come into the fall with college campuses and students coming back. That's an issue that she's going to have to watch for her Democratic Party so that it doesn't split it, with some Democrats really coming out in a vocal way as they were earlier in the year.
Clearly, excitement, enthusiasm on display over these past 4 days. A lot of us in the newsroom couldn't look away while the convention was taking place. But notably, former President Bill Clinton cautioned against being caught up in these good vibes. He said there's danger in being overly confident. How cautiously do you think the campaign needs to be moving forward?
Well, I don't think they have to be cautious tonight. I think they've had a good several weeks. In fact, they've really turned things around from the bottom where Joe Biden was struggling. But there is the sense that this is some momentum that has come from a new candidate, that she's not had to really present herself to the American people side by side with Donald Trump as she will in debates, and that come Labor Day, come September, that we're going to really have to focus on things. And we still don't really know a lot about her. So I think there's obviously some sort of honeymoon going on now, and they're going to have to come back to a more competitive race in September.
Lots of positive energy, but some are saying that's exactly the problem, that the convention was just one massive character reference for Ms. Harris, Trump bashing, light on concrete examples of her leadership. What do you think?
Well, look, I think these conventions are advertisements for the party. The Republican Party had a very good convention, very unified. The Democratic Party was very fortunate to put things together and have also a unified convention. So I don't blame them for being an advertisement for the parties. But I do think there are going to be real questions asked, especially about Kamala Harris. We don't know her as well as we know Donald Trump. We don't know her detailed issues on many of these subjects and how she's different than President Biden. And she's going to be tied a bit to some of the weaknesses of the Biden administration as she's tried to distance herself. I think those are challenges she's going to face going forward, not in the convention setting.
September 10th, surely marked on Ms. Harris's calendar because that is the day she will meet Donald Trump face to face in her first ever debate against him. Some people have criticized she hasn't even sat down with a journalist for a face-to-face interview yet. What do you think she needs to do during that debate, and how do you think she's going to prepare?
Well, I think she is going to need to sit down more with journalists, and that debate is an especially important point. Yes, I mean, Donald Trump is known to the American people, and Kamala Harris will make arguments such as she did today on the border and how it's a nuanced position that the administration has. And I think Donald Trump will come back and say, look at the performance, look at the number of people who have come in, look at the out of control character, look at the performance of the administration you're part of. And I think the substance of what she has to say, both going to the media, but also going to head with Donald Trump on some of these issues which are more contentious, that's really where she's going to have to prove herself. Tonight, she was able to say things without opposition. She's going to have to say things with media criticism and with criticism from the Republican Party and see how that stands up.
John, there are 70 odd days before Americans head to the polls. What's going to happen during those 70 days in the Trump camp? You know, they've had to pivot since Mr. Biden dropped out of the race. After seeing Kamala Harris speak tonight, what do you think their strategy is going to be in the remaining weeks?
Well, I think there's a little bit of worry in the Trump campaign. They were in a very good position against a weakened Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris has brought the party back. I think they still believe, though, that there are issues about this administration, which she's a part of, and some questions about whether she maybe is more far left than Joe Biden on certain issues from her past campaigns. Those are issues that they're going to try to paint, and they've had a difficult trouble trying to paint that because there's been enthusiasm about Kamala Harris. So their opportunity is really to show some contrast, to show Kamala Harris as part of an administration they see some problems with, but also as perhaps more to the left than Joe Biden, you know, not as close to the center, and therefore more out of touch. And that's been hard to do, but will be an opportunity for them to do when things calm down, I think, in September and as the debates come forward.
September just around the corner. I want to talk about President Biden now. He was on the stage wrapping up day one on Monday. Some say that was the beginning of his extended farewell. How well do you think this convention balanced honoring Joe Biden with celebrating Kamala Harris? Was this the place for that?
It's a very tricky thing. I think maybe they did as well as they could. I think they did give some credit to Joe Biden, especially on the first day. But you'll remember, of course, that he spoke on the first day several days ago. We're almost forgetting about him. He spoke very late at night, and there were a lot of compliments for him for stepping aside. But there obviously must be some hard feelings and some worries, both in terms of the president himself and also some of his supporters. So I think they did a pretty good job with a situation that is a bit difficult, at least for thinking about the feelings of the president. Kamala Harris is the leader of the party now. She's going forward. She's not the president, but she is the leader of the party. I think she's successfully done that. But it's been hard that Joe Biden has been pushed as a day one speaker, not as the main focus of this convention.
John, before I let you go, Having seen the Republican National Convention, now the Democratic National Convention has wrapped up. How inspired do you think undecided voters are to become engaged and vote? Do you think they got what they needed?
Well, interestingly enough, I think people have been complaining about how negative our politics is and people are down in politics. But at the same time, our last several presidential elections have been really high turnout for us. And in an odd way, sometimes conflict leads to higher turnout. So I still think there's a lot of polarization in this country. I think there'll be a lot of coming back to the parties and seeing Democrats seeing Donald Trump as an evil and Republicans seeing Kamala Harris as an evil. That may not be the most positive thing, but the sort of party messages and how they view the other side and what they think is important, I think is what may be driving us to what I think will be a pretty high turnout election. Maybe not quite what we saw in 2020, but on the high side, because we think it's an important election for the future of America.
Just over 70 days to go. Many more developments to come, surely. John, thank you very much for your time today. John Fortier, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute.